Welcome to the 2 Acre Homestead Podcast. We're your host, Lisa.
And Kevin.
And on today's episode, we're talking about how to start homesteading fast. Welcome to the 2 Acre Homestead. Come along with us on our journey from a small suburban homestead lifestyle to our new lifestyle, homesteading in the rural countryside of southern Arizona. We'll share with you our tips, tricks, successes, and failures from both our past suburban lifestyle to our new rural lifestyle, all on the 2 Acre Homestead. Okay, so on today's episode, again, we're talking about how to start homesteading fast. So here's the raw deal. When you're going to start homesteading and you want to try to start homesteading fast, the first thing you want to do is you want to think about what your why is. Now, we've discussed this on a previous episode on our podcast. That was in season 1. It was one of our first episodes where we talked about what was our why. That is probably one of the most essential things for you to know and to revisit as the years go by. Why are you doing this? Why do you want to do this? The second, once you found out your why, is the how, and that's what we're discussing today. Now, just to give you guys a little bit of a heads up, if you want more information than what we are giving to you on this podcast, go ahead and visit our website, the2acrehomestead.com, and look for the blog article that is the same as the title of this podcast, which is How to Start Homesteading Fast. That has a lot more information in it, so you'll be able to learn a little bit more in that particular blog article. But time is important, so let's get into it. So we want to figure out the how. How do you start doing this quickly? The first thing you want to do is you want to observe and learn. You need to know what your property is like. Now, I am saying property, but if you are, in an apartment building and you're on a balcony, obviously you don't have land, but you want to know and pay attention to what the sun is doing, where you're intending on homesteading, and all of the things that are included with homesteading, growing and producing your own food. So you want to observe, you want to learn your land, know where you're trying to homestead, know what that area is like. For example, if you have a backyard, you're in suburbia and you have a backyard, where does the rain pool? Where does it sit on your property? When it rains a lot, does the water stay in one particular area? When it snows and the snow melts, does it pool into one particular area? Is one area of your yard, for whatever reason, does it get more snow than maybe another area because of wind drifts? There's so many factors. And then also you want to pay attention to and kind of know what the sun looks like at different stages of the year. So for example, as of the recording of this, we are in autumn or fall, and the sun is lower in the sky than it is during the spring and summer months, where it's sitting higher in the sky. So you want to pay attention to that, because now you're starting to get into shadows and how things play on your land. But knowing your land, knowing your growing environment is very key to getting you to start homesteading fast. And we'll revisit this in a few minutes as to why that is so important.
Good. And when it comes to learning, so that was about observing. When it comes to learning, that may entail laws. regulations that you have to deal with. What do we mean by that? So it could be your city, it could be your county, could be some other municipality, could be do you have a homeowners association or an HOA? So some cities have poultry ordinances, for example. They may or they may not allow you to have chickens, for example. That may limit you. It may limit the number of birds you can have or where they can be placed in your yard. Example, when we lived in a city before we moved where we are currently, you had to have a chicken coop at least 20 feet away from a neighboring house. So that presented some limitations. Also, the number of chickens, that was something we had to deal with and we learned about. Where we are here, bit different. There's a bigger, amount of feet you have to be from property line of your neighbor as far as keeping animals in general. But here we can have other animals. We have goats now. So it's really important because, you don't want to have to, if you're going to invest in, for example, putting in posts, putting in fencing and so on, you don't want to have to tear it down because you put it too close or whatnot. So you need to need to learn the laws in your area where you're at. So our second tip that we want to talk about is mentality. Preparing yourself mentally to homestead is one of the most challenging things. So when we set out to homestead, when we set out to do things like garden, raise chickens and so on, we had to be determined that this was a change in our life and really understand the why. So when you do that, you start to share it with family and friends because you get excited. You want to tell them about it. But, you've got to be realistic because friends and family may start to think, they've lost their mind. What's going on? Why do you want to farm? You could just go to the grocery store and get it for whatever a pound, right? So be prepared. Your friends and family might give you a hard time.
Yeah. And a hard time they will. some, not all, but some. But, and it's so funny because many people complain about that rat race of life. Because they feel so, we've been just as a society, we've been so trained that we follow this rat race and we don't even think about it. You put, you go to work so that you can put gas in your tank so that you can go to the store, buy food so that you can keep living, just to go back home and start it all over again. And that is what's considered, air quotes, normal living, is that just that continuous race of life. And it's really not living. So any sort of variance from that normal type of living is frowned on and looked down upon. And you'll definitely get it from, if not friends and family, then somebody's definitely going to throw an opinion their way, or your way, I should say. But you really have to kind of toughen up your mentality and just know this is why I'm doing it, and, move on.
Yep. And, when you think like a homesteader, it's what we call the work method. So it's like this. So, somebody's going to tell you, man, that's a lot of work. But, you say, well, yeah, it's work, but it doesn't scare me. So, that person's going to see it as work, but as a homesteader, you see value in what you put into it. So, yeah, you wake up early every day and, you milk the animal, you throw out the feed, you make sure there's water for the animals, putting amendments in the soil, whatever that is. It takes work to store hay, to milk that animal for the year. Mm-hmm. The animals need care. Got to trim hooves, deworm, maybe move paddocks, install fencing. Yeah, it's work. But as a homesteader, you see the end product. Mm-hmm. Milk, meat. eggs and so on. So you think that from the milk of this animal, I can drink it. I can make cheese. I can make butter, yogurt, and things like that. And something that we enjoy, cream for our coffee. So we don't have to rely on those powdered things that are full of, all that other stuff.
That is the most important.
But first, coffee, right?
But first, coffee.
All right. So then our third item we wanted to touch on is get out and stay out of debt.
Amen to that one. So if you have existing debt, you need to figure out how to get out of it immediately, because there is nothing that will kill your homesteading dreams quicker and faster than debt. And let's be honest, what's going on in the world right now, we're not fear mongering or anything like that, but this is reality on the ground floor. I mean, some people are using credit cards to pay for basic necessities. So because things are expensive and they're getting worse and they're not getting any better anytime soon. And the world scene, as the Bible says, is changing. And all of this was prophesied to happen. So it doesn't, if you're a Bible reader, none of this is surprising. But when you, as the Bible says, the person who is in debt is a slave to the debtor. Mm-hmm. So you want to get yourself out of debt. And once you've gotten yourself out of debt, do everything possible to stay out of it. I know that's been hard for us. And I think it's hard for everybody right now because things are hard.
Yeah. Yeah. With, increase in prices of everything just quickly. So that can get out of hand quickly. Yep. The fourth item that we wanted to touch on is make your kitchen work. So you need to be able to process the food coming in when it's harvest season. You need to have the ability to preserve your food, store it and prep it. So one thing I know that we've learned this season, you can't put everything in the freezer.
We learned that a long time ago.
Well,
yes.
Okay. Well, yeah, 40, when you cull 48 or so chickens, that you can't put them all in the freezers, right? So you need to be able to function in your kitchen sometimes for long periods of time. It's not to scare you, but, realistically, you work hard to produce that food. You've got that glut of tomatoes, cucumbers. What else have we had? Okra, different things. Mm-hmm. You need to preserve it. So it means your kitchen's going to get dirty. As a husband, I know I step in a lot when I can,
Well, right now I have a countertop full of peppers.
Yes. Sorry.
I'm so tired of peppers.
I have needs.
Goodness.
But we appreciate it. So
having a kitchen that is functional, a lot of times, especially I'm speaking to you ladies, but it could be men too, but we look at Instagram, we look at YouTube videos. I don't know. Is Pinterest still a thing? I don't know. But anyway, we'll just say, we look at Pinterest, we look at all these pictures and we see all of these beautiful kitchens with all their nice shiny copper pans and everything is just picture perfect. That is not reality on the ground floor. That is somebody who has taken a picture. They have worked their buns off to clean their house or clean their kitchen and to make it picture worthy. But a real homesteading kitchen is going to have dirt. You're going to have dishes. You're going to have, like I just said, I've got a countertop full of peppers. You're going to have a mess. There's always going to be something that's a little bit messy. So you need a kitchen that can handle that. If you're looking to, oh yeah, I'm homesteading and I'm looking for, and you want to have the picture perfect kitchen, you can have it. Just depends on what your energy level is and if that's what you feel like you want to maintain. But when you start throwing children in the mix, harvesting, and everything else that goes on in between, picture perfect kind of goes out the window. So I'm just saying.
What's just on the other side of that camera,
Right.
The camera's put just at the right angle.
Right.
Okay. So our next item, our fifth item we want to talk about is, and I know you're passionate about this, grow a garden.
Yes. Newsflash, people. You cannot grow everything that you eat. Well, that's not true. You can. And it's a lot of work. But I've tried to do that when I first started homesteading. When we very first started homesteading, I tried to grow every vegetable that we ate. And I tell you what it just about killed me. So if you're looking to start homesteading fast and you want to just like hit the ground running, do yourself a favor. Write down the things, the big major items that you and your family consume the most of. The most. Not all of the things that you and your family eat, but what you eat the most of. So for example, if you eat a lot of tomatoes, if your family eats a lot of tomato-based meals, then write it down. If your family, doesn't like a lot of tomatoes, but your family likes, green beans, and you eat green beans, it seems like, 4 times out of the week, you may want to grow that. Write that down. Those are the big items that you're going to want to invest your time, money, and energy into growing.
And it's probably going to take a little bit of adjusting over time to figure out how much of that item, tomatoes or whatever, you need to grow to be able to provide that for your family for the year, right?
Exactly.
You might find you have too much or not enough, but
right.
Garlic, we can never have enough, right?
We can never have enough garlic. We eat so much garlic here. But if you, getting back to this, so if you try to do it all, you're going to accomplish one thing, and that is burnout. And burnout is real in the homesteading community. We all get burnt out. I think it's safe to say that those of us who are homesteading right now at this point in time, as we are starting to enter into the later part of fall, which is the later part of harvest season, we're all just a little bit fried at the edges when it comes to the gardening because, we're tired. You've been gardening for some time, but, just do your best to write down what you and your family grow or what you and your family eat, and write that down and make sure you're writing down the big things, and then grow those during your next gardening season. Now, the other thing I'm going to say too is when it comes to gardening, and I can't stress this enough because this will help you to start homesteading faster, and that is learn from somebody in your local area. Gardening is a very it's a very area specific skill. So you can know how to garden in general, but each area has its own diversity, its own tips, tricks, its own strange quirks. There are no, there's no areas that are the same. So if you can find somebody that's local to your specific area, look at the whites of that person's eyes, talk to that person shoulder to shoulder, learn how to garden in in your area, wherever you are in the world. That will help you get your garden going so much quicker than sitting around watching a bunch of YouTube channels and reading a bunch of books and a bunch of blogs and everything on the internet about gardening. Because, like, for example, I'll give our area, for example. We live in a very small rural community, and 10 miles away from our house is a completely different, it's not completely, but it's a different gardening zone. It goes from zone 8A to 8B. So we're 8A, and then 10 miles down the road, I can be in gardening zone 8B. And it's slightly different, and that's just 10 miles away. So, it's very specific to your area. So do your best to learn from the people who live in your area, who garden in your area. Learn from them. The other thing too that I want to mention is know your gardening zones. And if you go to the blog, we will put a link to the Farmer's Almanac, because I think that's probably the most effective way of knowing your growing zone. And that's important because that will tell you when to plant, either by seed, by transplant, or direct sow into the ground, when your first and last frost dates are. Those are super important to know. Because you don't want to be trying to plant tomatoes in the middle of February when there's still snow on the ground. I'm sorry, your tomatoes aren't going to make it. So knowing what your first frost date is and knowing what your last frost date is very, very important.
Sounds very good. And then our sixth tip is learn to cook from scratch.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Are you looking to build a homestead from the ground up? Or maybe you're looking to build an off-grid dream home, a vacation home, or maybe just a piece of land to call your own. Visit yourcheapland.com to buy rural land in the wide open spaces of southwestern United States. When you visit yourcheapland.com, they're here to help you, and with their help, you can do this. You can take your dream of owning land and make it a reality. Most down payments are only $294, including the document fee. Remember, everyone qualifies for financing at yourcheapland.com. Head on over to yourcheapland.com and start making those dreams come true. And now, back to our podcast. Knowing how to cook from scratch is probably something anybody, no matter where you are in the stage of homesteading, is the most, I think it's one of the most important skills. And that may be because the kitchen is the area that I seem to live in. I'm the cook and gardener of our family. So, cooking from scratch will save you money. Cooking from scratch is, well, let me put it this way. I've heard it said, every decision you make on your homestead is a culinary decision. So, if you decide to raise rabbits, for example, well, you need to know how to process those rabbits, but cooking from scratch, you need to know what to do with that meat when it hits the kitchen. Otherwise, what's the point? What's the point of you doing all of this? So knowing how to cook things from scratch, knowing how to cook with basic, real whole food. I'm not talking about the grocery store, but real whole foods is not only good for your health, but it's the whole point of what you're doing when you're homesteading.
And it's more satisfying, the meat that we've produced from our homestead. And when you make bread or tortilla, it's totally different. You can see it's dense. In the stuff you would buy in the store is just calorically, I don't know, how do you say that? It's just bleh.
Well, I was thinking, what was it yesterday? We harvested some cantaloupes
But yeah, those were awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, they weren't as big as some you might see in the store, but that's not the point, because it was dense. It was very full of water. It was just really good, very tasty,
and strong
and the kids
flavor.
loved it.
Oh man. I mean, you knew with every bite you were eating a cantaloupe, where, if you have a store-bought cantaloupe, there's no taste to it, but this had strong flavor. I mean, the kids were just down in it. Mm-hmm. They were just stuffing their faces with cantaloupe. I think one of them made themselves sick. Anyway, that's TMI for this episode.
Okay, so our our last item we wanted to touch on is learn to preserve.
Yeah, so learn how to. These are my 3 tips. Now, there's a lot of YouTubers and bloggers who will probably have a different opinion. So these are my 3 items when it comes to learning how to preserve. Now, I know a lot of people, bloggers, YouTubers, other people are going to have different opinions, and they're going to say, no, you need to have the full gamut. But if you're just looking to start immediately, these are the 3 areas of food preservation that I would encourage you. These are probably the most simplistic and easiest of all food preservations to do. And not in any specific order, but I would say the first thing that try to learn how to freeze your food properly. Yeah. There is a proper way to freeze food and an improper way to freeze food. Believe it or not. Some things like leafy greens, even your green beans, if you're going to freeze them, your broccolis, some of those foods need to be, they need to be boiled first. And, I can't think of the word.
Blanched.
I'm sorry. Thank you. They need to be blanched. So some of those foods like your broccoli and so forth, they need to be blanched, which that is doing a boiling them for like 1 minute and then putting them in ice cold water. And then after you've dried them off, then you can freeze them. So some things need to be blanched. Some things don't. Some things should be cut up. Some things shouldn't. So there is a proper way to freeze things. The other is, the second one is dehydrating. Now, I'm a huge fan of dehydrating things, just in general. I really love dehydrating foods, but it's one of the simplest things that I think you can do is to dehydrate most of your foods. But there is a proper way to do it, and there is an improper way to do it. The proper way, I strongly recommend, and this is based on my own personal experience. When I first started preserving my food, I got myself a cheap old little, I'm trying not to say the brand, but just a cheap little food dehydrator that did not have a temperature dial. No one told me. So I'm telling you, don't do that. Get yourself a dehydrator that has a temperature dial. It doesn't have to be an expensive dehydrator, but, get yourself one that has a temperature dial. The reason why that's so important is because herbs, for example, if you want to dehydrate your herbs and use them in your cooking or what have you, those need to be dehydrated at a certain temperature. If you want to make jerky, that needs to be dehydrated at a very specific temperature. And different foods require different temperatures. You're not going to get that with just a little old
plug it in and rip the cord back out when you're done, right?
Yeah, little cheapy dehydrator. So do yourself a favor, save up, spend a little bit more to get something that's a little bit better. So but dehydrating is a very good skill for you to pick up on immediately. The third and final one of the skills that I think that will help you is to learn how to water bath can. Now, I am an avid canner. My pressure canner is out at least once a week. Especially this time of year, at least once a week. I'm canning something all the time. But water bath canning is a little bit different. It's not, I know a lot of people get really scared of pressure canning. And to be quite frank with you, there's nothing to be afraid of. I've been pressure canning for years and we're still here. But water bath canning is a really good skill because it's a little less scarier for people than pressure canning. But water bath canning will help kind of ease you into the world of canning. And for most people, I know for myself, this happened to me too. When you start growing a lot of tomatoes, inevitably, you're going to have to learn to water bath can because you've got to preserve those tomatoes somehow. And making jams and jellies is another way to start water bath canning. But it's a very simple process. We will put links again on the blog that accompanies this episode in different resources for you to look up so that you can freeze, dehydrate, and water bath can safely.
All right. All of that information sounds good, and I'm glad that we were able to share it with you today. So, as we said, these are 7 tips on how to start homesteading fast. And as we mentioned, be sure to visit the 2acrehomestead.com. Go to the blog, find the article of that same name. We'll have some more information there as
Absolutely. Well, that is it for all of us here on our homestead. So from all of us here to all of you, wherever you are, please be safe out there.
And happy homesteading.
Thanks for listening.